Hello everybody, welcome to the county seat today. I'm your host Chad Booth. Today we're going to have a conversation one-on-one with somebody who is very well versed on government, local governments and state governments, and he's currently serving as the attorney out in Uintah County, Jon Stearmer. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Appreciate this.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity.
So our topic today is going to be about state senators and representation at the legislature. You know, the complaint always comes up that the legislature, because of the population in the state of Utah, is very unbalanced. It's been said many times that we are an urban state disguised as a rural state because the concentration of population in the Wasatch Front and another pocket in St. George. But if you look at our representation, where you're supposed to have equal representation across the state, particularly in the state Senate, you will have, surprisingly, 29 senators and 29 counties, but that's not the way it turns out, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Jon, let's start with a little bit of history. I've heard this two different ways, or multiple ways, from lots of different people that say we never were one senator per county, and we were, but it changed. There was a court case. What's the history of that? Do you know?
Yes, I had an opportunity to research some of the history, and going back all the way to when Utah was a territory and then obtained statehood, and then up to the 1960s, there were various iterations of representation in the state legislature. What I would like to really focus is fast forward to about the 1960s. During the civil rights era, there was obviously a lot of discussion, a lot of conversations happening across the country about equal representation, about making sure that voters are not suppressed in any way. As you can imagine, a lot of that was living in the Southeast. Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, those states were really the battlefields of these discussions, and for good reason. There was a court case in 1964 in the U.S. Supreme Court where the U.S. Supreme Court said it is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to not have equal representation in the state legislatures, even the bicameral, so the two different chambers of a House and a Senate. And so after that Supreme Court case, it started to bleed out into the rest of the country where all the states needed to, I think all the states needed to do constitutional amendments. Mm-hmm. We had a constitution section that stated where each representative would come from, where each senator would come from. It was not entirely based on population. It was based specifically with the House of Representatives. For our legislature, each county was entitled to one rep and then population thereafter, very similar to the United States structure. Mm-hmm. If you look at Wyoming has enough pronghorn probably to qualify for their own member of the legislature. They get their member of the legislature because the U.S. Constitution says they get one. Right. And it's not based on population. In fact, I think there's 6 or 7 other states that only enjoy one member in the House.
Right.
The other aspect of that is in the Senate. Obviously, most people know that the states enjoy equal representation in the Senate, two senators per state. So again, Wyoming, which has very little population, has the same power, the same voice as California does. So there was this whole debate about what is proper representation in the legislature. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1964 came down with a decision and said, Alabama, you're wrong. It needs to be population driven, and you need to change your composition in your state house. Or state legislature. Utah made that change, I believe it was in the early 80s by the time it moved its way completely through the system. It took a little while. But it finally, Utah came into line with the Supreme Court's decision, and we've had this so-called, and I say that because it's all population, the so-called bicameral legislature, but it's all population. It's all driven by population. So no disrespect to any of our good representatives or senators, just up the hill from here, but all they do is represent the popular opinion. One is more broadly based. We have 29 senators, and so it's spread over a larger population. But ultimately, they're voted in just by the voice of the people. Our governor is voted in statewide by the voice of the people, and our judicial branch is, of course, appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate. We do not have we don't have area representation in the state of Utah, which really is a disservice to rural Utah.
So I think we kind of have a good understanding of this. There's a really big conversation, and so I think what we'll do is now let this kind of sink in with people, okay, that we made some changes much later than I thought that put us on a track where the Senate is basically determined by an equal division of population like the legislature. But I'd like to come back after this break and talk about specifically how that should have looked and how it originally looked, and then get into some of the problems. And that'll take a bit. So we're going to take a quick break here on the County Seat. We'll be back with Jon Stearmer for a conversation about this right after this break. Welcome back to the County Seat. Our conversation is centered around, is it right for us to have one senator per county to give a geographical and an equalizing effect to represent rural Utah in our state legislature? Well, it sounds like the courts at some point said, no, that's not the case, John, but
they did.
It seems to me that was a little bit hypocritical in a decision, because we still, at a national level, select senators not by population, but by geographical designation. So is this a case of it's good for the goose or not, and not for the gander, or is there a difference?
Well, there is a little bit of a difference because we do have the 14th Amendment, right? I mean, the issues surrounding that cannot be dismissed around the 14th Amendment and how very long it took for things to right themselves, and probably still righting themselves within our country regarding civil rights and the individual voices that people have. I don't want this conversation to be portrayed in any way of trying to walk back the civil rights movement or walking back voter rights. But there is a conversation that needs to happen about whether or not, as our founding fathers, especially James Madison and Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers, said, the tyranny of the majority. Every power that I can find within the United States government framework is checked by some other power. Mm-hmm. Every single one. The Supreme Court is checked. The Chief Justice is checked within the Supreme Court. The President of the United States, although people give him the title the leader of the free world, he's checked very often by the people, by the legislature, by the courts. And I should say, keep gender out of it, the president, because here in the near future, we'll probably have a female president, which will be amazing. And our legislature is checked by the president, checked by the Supreme Court. The states are checked in their powers. California cannot rule the entire policy-making conversation in the United States of America. They are checked by the smaller states in the Senate. And so that's what I've been looking at, is going, I see where the U.S. Supreme Court was coming down saying we have a problem, especially in southern states at the time, 1960s, we can't dismiss history. We got to fix this. We can't have this gerrymandering going on and drawing lines where it suppresses votes. But at the same time, let me give these stats.
Yeah, okay.
Real quick. New Jersey is roughly 1/10 the size of Wyoming, but has 15 times the population of Wyoming. New Jersey has 12 representatives, Wyoming enjoys 1. But in the Senate, New Jersey has 2 senators, Wyoming has 2 senators. And that's something that when I've talked to our local representatives, county commissioners, and other elected officials, that's where they see there's a problem up at our Capitol Hill, where counties like Daggett, San Juan, Uintah, Duchesne, that they don't have that representation.
In a way, you know, if you go to Pennsylvania, you got Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, but it's not as urbanly concentrated as Utah, although people would think that it is, because you have lots of centers of 30,000, 40,000. You have Logans everywhere, and you very seldom have Bicknells or Loas or you know, Altamonts, just to put it out into the basin. Yeah. And so it's a very similar situation where you have a lot of impact that should be geographically based. And I've been trying to figure out, I'm putting my head around this, trying to figure out why there's a difference between how the federal gets away with it or is able to still maintain that position and the state is not. And the only thing I can figure, the only difference I can see is that states are sovereign, and so their sovereignty makes a difference with the federal government, and counties are subsets of states.
I think there is something there. The U.S. Supreme Court had to deal with other pesky language in the Constitution. So while they were defining the breadth of the 14th Amendment on this issue, the U.S. Constitution dictates 2 senators per state. Each state gets at least 1 representative and then population thereafter. So the Supreme Court didn't have the ability under the 4 corners of the U.S. Constitution to say this provision violates that provision. They have to make sure that they both jive at the same time. We don't have that. We don't have competing language for the states. And they are the United States of America, right? Each state comes in and then enjoys equal footing when they come into the union. My proposition, and others who are debating this, is the counties are political subdivisions of the state.
Correct.
We do state business all the time. We have dozens of unfunded mandates where the state says counties take care of this for us, but we don't have that equal representation in the state Senate, even though we get these unfunded mandates. Salt Lake County, basically it's the I-15 corridor, really, if you want to think about it. Sure. The I-15 corridor controls the dialogue in the Senate. And so counties who are supposed to be doing a lot of the business of the state, those little counties are just getting pushed to the side. And I don't even think it's because people are trying to do it. It's just they live there. No. I mean, I pay attention to issues that affect my neighbors. I love all the people who live down in Iron County. I don't live in Iron County. So it's hard for me to have that, that empathy, that understanding of all the issues that are going on down there, same as San Juan County. That's what our elected representatives are supposed to do. But if all those counties only get 1 senator, I mean, some of these Senate districts, we have 5 to 7 counties in 1 Senate district, and they're having to go up against Salt Lake County that has half dozen senators that come out of Salt Lake County. They just get drowned out in the noise.
Well, and it becomes a steamrolling effect because the population is driving both of them, and you've lost a check that you should have. But I mean, I don't know how you get the genie back in the bottle because we've made the switch, and I can't see anybody in the state Senate advancing anything that will say, yeah, we should go back to having 1 senator in each county
because vote themselves out of power.
He's going to vote themselves out, and it's a very selfish thing. It's like
it can be.
It's those other 7 senators, only one of us is going to survive. That's not fair, and that's kind of how people look at it. I'm not sure that that's right, but it's kind of how people look at it. So, what do we do? What is the solution? Where do we go?
Well, first we have to have the conversation. The conversations always start, and they are the genesis of action being taken later. So having a forum like this is great. I attended some committee hearings with our good commissioners of Uintah County up at the state legislature this year, and I think the key is to keep the conversation going. It wasn't surprising that immediately in attending one of those committee hearings, one of the members of the committee came right into, well, what about that Supreme Court decision? My opinion is, what about that Supreme Court decision? Let's review it. let's see, what was the basis of that decision? Can we honor the basis of that decision and still get somewhere in this conversation? We also have a completely different Supreme Court than we had back in the 1960s. The key is, this is one thing that I thought about, and I'm still exploring it, so forgive me if it's rough around the edges.
Well, everything I do is rough around the edges. It's okay.
It's awesome. Makes for better TV. If the whole purpose of the Supreme Court decision was equal protection and making sure that disenfranchised individuals can have their voice heard, we're not having that on a distinct portion of our population, specifically on Indian reservations with tribal government. San Juan County, they have the Navajo Nation there, the Uintah Indian Reservation in the Uintah Basin. Their voices are drowned out in this matter. If San Juan were to have one senator and those neighboring counties one senator, if Uintah County has one senator and Duchesne County has one senator, those underserved populations would have more of a voice. I mean, I get it. I understand the reasons why the Supreme Court said what they said in the 1960s. The problem is I think we have unintended consequences now. Well, by having rural Utah not be able to have a voice, there are underprivileged communities that are being drowned out in the state dialogue.
But we've seen it. It just depends upon how you group them. They may not all be racial, but underserved. Ranchers are underserved. The energy sector is in the carbon counties is underserved based on some state policy, and I know governors try to correct it and the likes, but it doesn't always happen. So I'd like to take a break here and come back. We've got to make a little commercial space, but let's talk about when we come back maybe how that works. We're not going to put it back, but there might be some middle ground, and we should look at it and see what the consequences are. We'll be right back with a conversation about one senator, one county, one way forward on the county seat. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the county seat. We are having a conversation about why we should be looking at realigning how we district our state senators. Historically, the concept was originally that you'd have a senator for each county, just like the national government does, and then population based in the state legislature.
Yeah. So I guess we get to the question, what do we do about it? I don't know at this point. We got to have people who are willing to have the conversation first, and then we have to have people who are willing to say, something for the betterment of the state. We need to redraw some boundaries. We need to check that with Supreme Court precedent and make sure that we're not just going to walk the state of Utah into a undefensible lawsuit.
Right.
I don't mind lawsuits. My job deals with lawsuits. I tell people, pick a number, stand in line. Whatever. I'll see you when you actually make good on your promise to sue. But this should be an issue that anybody who believes in our form of government, which is as free as possible, with reasonable restrictions and a check on every power, why shouldn't we have that for the state of Utah? And why wouldn't the U.S. Supreme Court work with the states to try and figure out what would be a good solution? How could we make sure that we're protecting the individual's right for equal representation, yet still have a check, again, back to that term, tyranny of the majority.
Right. But you kind of get back to the same point that I was making earlier in our conversation, John, when I say Pennsylvania is a very different state. Georgia is a very different state than Utah because their population centers are different. And it may not be as egregious a problem in a state that's got 200 counties. Some states do. And so it more closely can match a legislative thing because the population
exactly. Not every state would probably need this type of a fix.
No.
Right. And I'm not here, and I hear exactly what you're saying. Not here suggesting that this needs to be a model for every state. Every state is their own sovereign government that joined into a union and now we get to function together as the United States of America. But who is Utah to tell Arizona how they should have their representation?
Well, precisely. I mean, I look at Nevada. You know, if you've got Nevada divided into like 15 counties, I believe, not 29, 15, and only 2 of them have a population base in them. And so most of the senators are representing those 2 counties. If I lived in Caliente, I would be as hot as the name implies about this issue.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know, where's the compromise? Because like we said earlier, you know, you're not going to have a block of Wasatch Front senators say, oh yeah, we should go back to the way it was.
Well, and they may not, but we don't need all of them to agree to it. If we're going to amend our state constitution and then pass the laws to then effect those constitutional changes, we don't need all 29 to agree. So I think we need to just start having the conversation with each senator. I think we need to have a very robust review of the Supreme Court decisions. The way I am reading both the holdings and the dicta, which is the kind of their off-the-wall topics that they like to throw into cases, I think there is a workaround, especially if we preserve the popular representation in our legislature. And maybe what we do is not go back to what it was before, where each county enjoyed 1 representative and then population thereafter. Just keep it the way it is. Sole population representation in the legislature, or sorry, in the representatives, and then in the Senate have more of a geographic representation. So we're able to show those who would want to be critical of this, well, okay, where is your equal, where does each voter have their equal representation? And we go, well, it's right there. It's in the House of Representatives. And it's there in the governor's office, and the Senate is there to check that power. Seems reasonable to me, well, but you know.
But then that could make the argument of saying, okay, we'll put 1 in for every county. We'll go back to the way we were, and I don't think that's possible. And so the other solution is leave it as it is and make sure that the counties at least have 1 senator, and make it kind of like the other one. But it only partially improves the problem.
And this is just my opinion. In my opinion, the Senate should play a separate, distinct role in government than the House of Representatives.
Oh, I agree.
Right.
I agree.
And I think they need to play a different role than the governor's office. So expanding the number of seats in the Senate, I think, dilutes its authority and its power. I like the idea we have 50 states. They get 2. We know we're locked in at 100 senators. That's what we have. And senator from New York is going to have to walk across the hall and talk to the senator of Nebraska. They're going to have that communication. But if all you do is essentially pack the Senate, you hear people talk about packing the court, it only helps for a minute, and then you have a lot of unintended consequences. So in my view, I think the number 29 is great. We have our counties. Everybody knows where our counties are. Give them a senator. Let the other chamber be represented by the population. And then ultimately, the population is also served by the governor.
And we've run out of time. I can't believe that we don't have more time to talk about this. Jon, thank you so much for taking the time. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be engaged, be involved, and we'll see you next week on The County Seat. Thank you for watching The County Seat. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications to keep up to date on the program and happenings around Utah.